The most popular comic book series right now is the Xmen. It's published by Marvel Comics, located in the building behind me here in downtown Manhattan. The Xmen are subhuman beings with supernatural powers bent on destroying evil. In this particular issue, God, Love, Man Kills. The Xmen, of course, are the heroes. The villain, a Christian evangelist. An evangelist felt he was called by God to destroy mutants like the Xmen.
In this point, and if he looks up, he is not this evil incarnate, and then he says, in awe and wonder, he looks up to behold a man. Now, you recall the statement in the gospel, echo homo, behold a man, which had to do with Jesus. And here, there's a shaft of light, and he looks up to behold a man.
Yo! We're gonna talk about God Loves, Man Kills. This is a good comic written by Chris Claremont. It's really hard to come by. You gotta read it online. Or maybe you can find a physical copy for like $100, but screw all that. Let's get into the plot. Let's not waste any time. Shout out Rod. Chapter 1, The Debate. Dim night, elementary school. We see two kids run from an unknown threat. Kids fear even their folks can't help them anymore. And before the page even ends, one of the kids gets shot. The kids are being chased by purifiers. More on them later. They waste no time killing off the kid who they injured. The purifiers claim to this elementary school girl that she has no right to live and kill her off. Magneto pulls up to the scene where the kids are hung on a swing set. Magneto, mutant extremist, sees this and proclaims he's going to find the people who did this and kill them. Meanwhile, in a building called Stryker Headquarters, we meet our main antagonist, Reverend William Stryker, who is the most interesting villain in all of Marvel Comics. Don't at me on that. He is awesome. What makes him so compelling is the fact that his superpower is how he can pretty much work a crowd. Heck, he's organizing a debate with Professor X on ABC. Meanwhile, Kitty Pryde is getting into a bar fight with a man who is seemingly a part of the Purifiers. He calls Kitty Pryde's black friend Stevie a mutie lover. Trust me, it's super important that she's black. And this drives Kitty even more mad, which for some reason Stevie doesn't understand. Okay. Which leads to Kitty Pryde comparing mutie lover to saying the N-word lover. And trust me, she doesn't say the N-word, she actually says the N-word. And the next page shows Stevie acknowledging that Kitty's right. Now, quick tangent, and I know I have no right to speak on this, but do you really think that's how the situation would be handled? Isn't it more realistic for Stevie to just get what discrimination feels like?
Today's subject is slavery.
I mean, I googled it. Martin Luther King Jr. is 616 canon. It's a little silly to think that Stevie needs to be reminded by Kitty about discrimination. This has the same energy to me as Chance the Rapper's views on Bright. I definitely think nowadays the situation would be more Stevie knowing immediately that it's wrong and throwing the parallels of American racism in the Purifier's face. But whatever, I'm only on page 8 and I'm Mexican American, so I acknowledge that I barely have room to comment on this. Feel free to hit me in the comment section with your own opinions on this. The bar crew heads back to see the long-awaited debate, and the debate seems pretty rigged. ABC Studios, I will never forgive you for this. Stryker wins the debate easy. Cyclops even claims that Professor X looks scary at some points. So this ticks off the X-Men at home, so they go into the danger room to blow off some steam, when suddenly, coming from ABC Studios, Professor X, Cyclops, and Storm die in a car accident. Nightcrawler receives the call and looks out in horror as his 3 leaders are dead. So, this first part's kind of mid, honestly. It's setting the stage up. Definitely starts to pick up here in these next few chapters. Part 2, An Unlikely Alliance. Kitty's alone by the lake mourning her friends when Ileana shows up to offer Kitty support. But Kitty doesn't want support. She wants to break the Bechdel test over Colossus, who is just way too old for her. Meanwhile, Wolverine, Colossus, and Nightcrawler scope out the scene of Professor X and company's passing. Wolverine smells that the bodies aren't of their companions because, let's just say, Wolverine has had to stage a few crime scenes. Nightcrawler spots some suspicious activity, leading to the coolest Colossus moment I've ever seen in my few years with these characters. After ambushing the car, one of the Purifiers drives off with Nightcrawler in the car. He teleports her out of there for Colossus to stop the car by ripping out the engine. Let's give it up for Brent Anderson. This artist is amazing. After this, a Purifier shoots Colossus with a gun that's seemingly injuring him, when suddenly Magneto pulls up, incapacitating the Purifiers. Wolverine turns around ready for some action when Magneto simply says, "Magneto is here as a friend, and if you'll have me, an ally." Meanwhile, the Purifiers kidnap Illyana and Kitty Pryde. This leads to Wolverine interrogating some Purifiers to little results. He's good at killing, not torturing. And so Magneto shows him how it's done by, slicing him up with metal. And Kurt is pretty shocked by this. He's like, "Yo, Wolverine, is this cool?" And Wolverine's like, "It is." It's pretty cool because a lot of the moral debate between Magneto and Professor X are really tested in this story. How can you fight a big population of people who just believe that they're in the right? And especially when they're going to the lengths of murder, How do you fight that off? That's what this explores. We're on to chapter 3, Strike. On top of the World Trade Center, the X-Men carry their professor to crucify him. They nail him to a cross and kill him off as Cyclops pulls out his optic blast. Professor X sees a man in white, a holy man, perhaps his solution to his troubles. Cut to the next page, and the professor is in a tube. It was all in his head. Cyclops and Aurora are summoned and ask, why is Reverend William Stryker doing this? Which leads to the Reverend saying, "Because you exist, and that existence is an affront to God." This leads to the most chilling scene in the comic. The art is different, blurry. 30 years ago, Stryker was working in the military at a nuclear plant. When he was off duty, his wife was expecting. On the road to visit his family, they suffered a severe car wreck. To make matters worse, it was delivery time for his wife. William Stryker had to deliver his child on the side of the road next to the car wreck, and when he sees his baby, he's horrified at the sight of it. He claims he had to kill it. It was a monster. His wife asks to hold her baby, and he snaps her neck. To stage a scene, he burnt leaking gas from a car with their bodies in them. This leads to him being dismissed from the military and turning to alcoholism. But as many people in his position do, he turned to religion. And also heard Professor X talking about mutants on TV. This leads him to believe his son was a mutant, and they are a demonic force. Now, aside from some parallels you can draw to the LGBT plus people, shout out Power of the X-Men, I'm gonna read between the lines a little on good old Stryker. Now, to me, Stryker is a man who feels extremely guilty. He successfully gets away with murder and assumes his son is a mutant. Keep in mind, this guy doesn't know what mutants are on the day. He killed his family, and for all the audience knows, his child could have had like progeria or giantism. I doubt he's well versed in those two states of being. So what does he do? He goes on a mission to have everyone hates mutants. He doubles down. If more people hate mutants, it's okay that he killed his son, right? There's a moment where he refers to his son as he, then corrects himself, calling him it. Some part of Stryker knows that mutants are humans, but he can't let that subconscious thought be correct. If so, he killed his child. I've heard preachers with children in the LGBT community preach harder on the subject, and that's the same vibe as what Stryker is going through. This is what the X-Men movie Stryker is missing. It's not that he is a preacher, It's that his insecurity in his decision making leads him to doubling down. So my main issue with the movie version is that William doesn't have at least a similar origin. In the movies, William's wife committed suicide due to Jason playing with her head, and Jason's William's son, which is a cool origin story for sure, and fits that narrative, but it isn't the same as William dealing with the consequences of his action. He's just like, dang, my son's the guilty one. He can blame all these actions on mutants. I love this character and what he represents to the X-Men, and the dangers of looking at people for what they identify as and judging them. After this origin story, William orders a hit on Kitty Pryde, which doesn't go well because she can phase. I mean, why would a bullet work on her? Kitty Pryde runs into a gang that helps her get away from the Purifiers. She tries calling the X-Men, but the Purifiers blow the building that she's in up. She runs into a subway where she gets cornered by Purifiers. A cop tries to help her, but even he gets shot. All hope is lost. But again, the master of magnetism is here to save her. And hell, he can even save the good cop. JK ACAB, baby. Meanwhile, Professor X is being probed by Stryker after yapping verses. Stryker tells Professor X that God wants to be in his life and that his children cannot come first. This leads to Professor X seemingly killing Cyclops and Storm's brain activity. Turn him into a vegetable. Nightcrawler and Kitty find Dr. Ramsey, an associate of Williams. Nightcrawler creeps him out for information in a genuinely scary experience. Meanwhile, at the Stryker headquarters, Illyana, Cyclops, and Storm are being transported via an elevator. And of course, Magneto can just yank that out of the thing. One of Stryker's henchmen jumps out of there and somehow makes it back onto the building, which is pretty epic. So Magneto yanks the thing out of the building and takes them home. Thankfully, they are still alive and just a vegetable at the moment. Magneto helps them get back into shape, and when Cyclops asks why he's doing it, he basically responds like Anakin talking to Padme in episode 2, you know.
How do you have it work?
We need a system where the politicians sit down and discuss the problem, agree what's in the best interest of all the people, and then do it.
That's exactly what we do. The trouble is that people don't always agree.
Well, then they should be made to.
Sounds an awful lot like a dictatorship to me.
Well, if it works.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
So things are ramping up in this comic. This is probably like one of the coolest things that we see is Stryker's origin story. I can talk about Stryker all day. Stryker is such a great villain, and yes, we love that. Now let's go to part 4, debate rematch. Meanwhile, William Stryker is convincing a brainwashed Professor X to find any mutant in the world and potentially kill them using a thing called Dark Cerebro. It's like Cerebro, but it's dark. Later, Stryker spits game in an arena full of people about how anything that isn't a traditional human is from hell. The way Brent Anderson draws the stadium he's preaching in and apparently on TV to the millions of people honestly brings me chills. It's so cool to look at. Like, look at this art. Everybody clap for Brent Anderson if you're at home. Clap for that man. Meanwhile, Dark Cerebro is unleashed and the X-Men are paralyzed and bleeding from their ears as the raw, unfocused power of Professor X hits them all. Now I'm so excited to talk about my favorite panel in this comic, Magneto entering through the arena ceiling and powerfully yells, "Stryker!" Magneto claims that if he wants a war between mutants and humans, they should have a little chat because he's gonna be king of the mutants. Stryker proclaims Magneto as the Antichrist, quoting Revelations on him. We cut to Senator Kelly, who's advised that the crowd is getting riled up and they should dip. Using all of the Dark Cerebro, Stryker smacks down Magneto. The crowd tries getting close to him, but he can push them off using magnets, I guess. And then back to Senator Kelly, we see that his ear is bleeding like all the other mutants. Heck, one of Stryker's associates is bleeding. The one that was after Kitty and Ileana. She has been at his side the whole time. But Stryker has to double down, and he pushes her off of the podium, which is very high for some reason, like very exaggerated high. And she falls on her neck and breaks her neck on impact. The audience is conflicted. Police go to Magneto's aid, as he hasn't done anything illegal and everybody's out to kill him, making sure no one gets killed any further back. Meanwhile, in the back of the arena, Cyclops incapacitates the mind-stolen Professor X and destroys Dark Cerebro. Cyclops then tells the team that the only way they're gonna win is by publicly breaking down Stryker's character. Storm, Kitty, Colossus, Wolverine, and Nightcrawler agree. The crowd looks in awe as the X-Men pull up to the stage, and Cyclops challenges him to a round 2 debate. Cyclops tries checking him on why he treats mutants differently and not people of other skin. Stryker surprisingly claims that they are human. Again, refer to Chance the Rapper tweet, and just for reminders, Martin Luther King Jr. is 616 canon. Cyclops asks, is his power more different than an athlete or a super genius? How do humans even know they're not the mutants? And this leads to probably the most iconic image in this whole book. It's Stryker singling out Nightcrawler and asking the audience, "Human? You dare call that thing human?" Which is also wild when you consider that Nightcrawler is Catholic and he's probably the closest in religion to Stryker, both believing in God, the Christian God. Kitty proclaims Nightcrawler more human than the Reverend. The Reverend claims blasphemy and exercises his Second Amendment right to kill a 13-year-old girl. But before he can kill, one of the policemen shoot the Reverend and tell the X-Men they did nothing wrong and they are indeed free to go. Hey, that's a good cop, right? A-cap. Later at the mansion, Professor X has an existential crisis. He had intent to kill the other mutants, but Scott won't take that. It might seem weird that Scott won the debate and not Professor X, considering that Professor X taught him everything he knows, but the panel shows how deep Cyclops thinks about this. Professor X wants diplomacy over everything, but when you're in a debate, you need to be aggressive, you need to be pushy, and you need to sound like the most competent person in the room. Cyclops keeps Professor X back on his side, and Professor X denies Magneto's ways, even though part of him views Magneto more reasonable. Magneto leaves amicably. Professor X cries. Storm and Cyclops hang out outside. And the end. Woo! This story has some less than perfect moments, but man, it is good. Magneto is the most compelling frenemy of the X-Men. We all know this. Seeing him confront Stryker in front of millions of people is so cool. Both of them are extremists. That's what makes that scene awesome. It's more than the presidential debate. I love Stryker in this comic, and his story here, in my opinion, is much better than he is in the movies. He's not attached to Wolverine. Hell, Wolverine is barely in this comic. And the added allegory to religion is very entertaining and thought-provoking in this particular instance. Better than the race allegories in this comic, in my opinion. Well, I think that covers everything. Please get this book. Like and subscribe. You know the deal. I hope you're watching this with your I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that this time. This story's too controversial. I'm gonna say something I'm gonna regret. And I'm gonna have to deal with those consequences. You know this book is rare?